ladies and gentlemen, in the blue corner, standing at a sleek 5'11", 245 pounds, the tumultuous tempest of technique, Thomas Lilly. And in the red corner, at a curvaceous 5'11", 315 pounds, the jovial juggernaut of judgment, John Cheryl Sheridan. A meeting of the masters of mastication. Turn your attention as they delve deep into all things lifting and more. This is Peak Speak.
And we are back for another Peak Speak.
I think you should just stick to your normal accent, to be honest.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's a bit weak.
Like, you could practice it, but I don't know if it's worth practicing.
If you can hear the squelching of eyes this whole podcast, it's because for some reason my eyes are on fire.
Yeah, Thomas has pink eye, but he doesn't want to tell everyone. So, just don't tell anyone.
You know, all these years I've made pink eye jokes and I don't actually know what it is. I just know it's got something to do with maybe poo and eyeballs.
Yeah, look, I'd like to say I'm a medical doctor and I have an accurate description of that, but I don't.
No,
I believe it's
just
like conjunctivitis-y sort of stuff, but yeah, I'm not a doctor. See your doctor. Don't Google your problems. It's a bad idea.
Thanks. And that's Peak Speak for another episode.
That'd be a high-rating episode.
All right, John, tell us what's happening in your world. What's happening in the world of Burley? What's happening in the world of controversial Facebook statuses that have set the world on fire this week?
Yeah, look, let's not go too far down that road. Look, not a lot's happening. We've got we're doing a bit of a photo shoot at the gym tomorrow to get some new photos and videos and stuff for social media and the website, which will be a fun time. And we have our first novice comp for the year next weekend. So everything's sort of gearing up for that. Our first comp with a third gender division. I had a chat with the Canberra Times the other day, so there's going to be an article about that. They were really interested in the diversity side of things, which will be cool, and more exposure for a sport that no one cares about.
Wonderful.
But yeah, so that'll be good, and should be a big day. Running a workshop at the gym on Sunday, a powerlifting workshop. So I've got like 3 weeks in a row of 7 days a week, which is going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
But I think my record's still like 48 days straight or something like that. So 3 weeks is pretty cruisy at this point. But
That's the hashtag business owner.
Yeah,
Hashtag
hustle, grind.
Freedom, grind.
Yeah, exactly. 24/7 hustle, etc.
Self-made.
Yeah. What's happening with you, my friend?
Well, hang on. Before we get into that,
Okay.
to take a spin maybe, and we can stop recording and start again if you don't want to talk about this. But the USAPL trans blow-up, speaking of Facebook and internet blow-ups, what are your thoughts? Well, first, what happened, and then what are your thoughts? For
those of you that haven't followed this, you should follow the @StrengthInsider Instagram page, who do essentially just strength sports gossip. There was a transgender person who was planning to compete in a USAPL comp and met what was at the time the transgender guidelines, which I believe initially mimicked the IOC policy. So the IOC policy says for male to female transitions, they have to have been on hormone therapy for, I think, a couple of years and show a free testosterone level below a certain number, which is, I believe, the case. My understanding is this athlete met all of those guidelines and then was essentially told they weren't allowed to compete. And the USAPL has since changed their transgender guidelines to essentially exclude all transgender lifters. And specifically as well, female to male who are taking testosterone as part of hormone therapy. It's a murky water. I don't pretend to have a full understanding of where you can draw these lines when it comes to creating a fair and relatively open sport. The thing that I think is most disgraceful is the complete 180 in the policy. And I think that, I'm all for inclusion and opening the sport to as many people as possible. That's why we're running a competition with a third gender category.
Exactly.
Because I'm all about that opportunity. But I don't pretend to be someone who has the full scientific knowledge or anything like that. And I default back to the IOC guidelines, because I think if anyone in the world has an accurate view of the role of gender in sport at present, it's the IOC, because they've spent the last 3 or 4 decades studying this stuff, before I don't like using the rise of transgender people because I think that belittles the whole process, but before it became a more apparent issue in sport and in wider society, the IOC has been studying this stuff for decades. So I think when it comes to developing a guideline for it or a policy, I think the IOC policy is a really, really well thought out, well backed in science policy. And I think the really disgraceful thing is they completely reversed that. They had that as a policy and then situationally decided that they weren't going to do it, and they've changed the whole thing. I think that backflip is a bit disgraceful. I don't necessarily know what the solution to it is, nor do I claim to have a better option. But I think the fact that you can have such a public backflip based on essentially one case leaves a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, no, it's drove people a little bit nuts. I guess where I stand on the whole thing is like, I'm all for inclusion. As you know, there are a few trans lifters in Australia, and I know a few of them personally. And for example, Jackson has done great things, and following his journey has been really cool.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to formulate an opinion, put out an opinion, just because I don't have the empathy, because I can't. How can I ever know what someone who has experienced transgender has ever gone through? How can I ever connect with the pain that they've had to go through for their whole lives? It's really hard for me to sit back and take a really logical approach, because the only way I know how to do that is with my understanding of my own experiences.
Yep.
So it's really hard for me to formulate a really valid opinion, because I don't have a lived experience of it, and I don't have really close transgender friends or family, so I haven't vicariously experienced their lived experiences. And I'm not saying that as a cop-out. I'm saying, how can I give a public opinion and make a public comment? Because I feel like there's too much of the opposite happening. There's too much of people slinging opinions around that could never, ever understand it. And you see the opinions being like, well, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do this or settle for that? Or it's like, how can you understand what this person has been through and is going through? And a lot of it comes down to the principle of the matter. More than just being, black and white, this is right, this is wrong. It is a quite, like you say, it's a murky water to venture into.
Yeah, man. And I think that's, I feel very much the same. I'm running a third gender category because, like I said before, I am for inclusion and for what is already I think in most cases, a relatively inclusive sport, because it's a very low barrier to entry. Powerlifting has a very low barrier to entry in the scheme of things. And for me, opening that third gender category is just an easy option to provide an opportunity for a group of people who have, in most cases, spent a lot of their lives being marginalized and victimized and just generally treated like shit. And it's no extra work for me necessarily, and even if it was, I'd happily do all of that work, because it's an opportunity to provide these people a platform, right?
That's right.
And an opportunity to compete in the sport that we all love. That it doesn't take a lot for me, I think when it comes to having a sanctioned end of things, it certainly becomes a lot murkier, because there's so much argument essentially, and I think the most disheartening thing is most of the negative comments around this come from cisgendered white guys who get up in arms about things that are going to have absolutely no effect on them. I am yet to see any cisgendered females who have complained about male to female transgender athletes competing as a female. All of the complaints, all of the arguments against it come from cisgendered men. And I think that speaks to that idea of empathy, right? Like, as a cisgendered heterosexual white male who's had a relatively easy life, I can't empathize because I don't have, like you said, I don't have that experience, but that doesn't mean I can't be a nice guy about it and
That's right.
offer a platform for them to have an experience that I know is a really positive one, and and to provide an environment like that. So for me, I'm always going to lean towards the just be nice to people and give people the opportunity, and then open that up for people, and then we sort of see where it goes, you know?
And that's fucking cool, man. You're doing a really good thing there.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I hope it goes really well.
Yes, it should. It's looking pretty good. We've got it. It's all sold out, so it'll be a good day.
Fucking awesome, man. Really, really cool.
So what's happening in your world, Thomas? I hear you got an owie.
Yes, I had an owie on Monday. I was squatting. My first session back from the deload. Feeling pretty good. Everything was great. And then on my third rep of one of my first triples, I tore an adductor.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess I just wanted to quickly unpack this a little bit. I mean, we've already done an episode of on injuries, but
yes,
when you go through that again, immediately you have that lived experience right in front of you, and it's good to kind of, I guess, connect with that. And I had this conversation live with my online coaching clients in the private group that we have on Facebook. Because a lot of people were really surprised that I've kind of been relaxed about the whole thing. I haven't been upset. I've had, I put a post on Instagram, and it looks like the typical, oh, he's just being positive sort of post, but that's just how I am about these kind of things. It's like, I guess I'm coming from a bit of a, I don't know if bias is the right word, but an experienced background. So I went down to the bottom of the squat on the third rep, went to push up, felt it tear, told the guys to grab the bar, and we stood up with it. Within 2 minutes, I was sitting on the bench, I was laughing. Ricky had ran across the room, grabbed me some ice. I had that on my leg. It's just chilling out. I spent the rest of the night wrapping knees and helping out and doing work, and it's just a normal night, and I didn't get upset or anything like that. And that's because, I felt it go. I was like, okay, well, I know it's torn. In that moment, what can I do about that? What can I change to... I can't untear that muscle. I can't fix that injury. So getting upset about it isn't going to help. Moreover, if you get really upset in those moments, if you get really angry, and then you spend the next few days or the next few weeks moping about it, all you serve to do is attach a whole heap of negative emotion to that event. And what people lose sight of, and this is only something you're going to know when you go through something like this, is that when you start the rehab process, when you get back under the bar, for a while there, no matter how much you are convinced that you're healed, even if you go get a scan that says, you know what, there's nothing wrong with you anymore, there's going to be an inherent fear programmed into you every time you touch a bar, whether it's neurally avoiding that side of, the bilateral movement, you're shifting into the other leg, or whatever it is, or if it's just mental, I'm scared. The bigger the event is in your head, the more negative emotion you attach to it, the longer it's going to take to get over that fear. And the next time it happens, the worse off you're going to be. So there's no point in getting all up in arms about it and screaming and carrying on and getting all depressed about it. It's like you can't change what just happened. You can learn from what just happened, and if there's nothing to learn, if it was just a freak thing, you just have to deal with it. You just have to do everything you can to get back as quick as you can. So you have to work out strategies, and there are strategies when it comes to injury to get back to performance quickly. This is when you have to draw from like sports science. If a sprinter tears a hamstring, guess what they're doing the next day? They're working it. They're doing stuff about it. They're trying to, the injury management side of things in actual real sports is so scientific, and so in our sport, it's like we get hurt and we just cry. So it's like, okay, well,
Maybe post on Instagram, get some thoughts and prayers.
Oh, absolutely. 1 like equals 1 prayer, of course. But the other thing with this kind of injury, it's like, again, I'm coming from an experienced background. I've been through this a bunch of times.
These are my praying hands. That's my praying emoji. I bumped my mic there.
I'm pretty sure I don't have that on my phone. But anyway, what was I just saying? Yeah, if you've never experienced this, when it happens, it's a shocking experience. It's really freaky. It's really quite hard to deal with.
It's a really weird feeling as well. Like, we had a brief discussion about this before we started. Like, if you've never torn a muscle, I've had people, and I'm sure you have as well, like, I think I tore this muscle. Like, I've only torn one muscle once. I tore my calf doing a handstand. And I knew I'd torn it the second I tore it, because I felt it tear. And it was different to any other muscular strain, tweak, injury feeling I'd ever had before. And it was so distinctive that I knew it was torn. And I think when you can identify that, then you'll be okay. But the point about attaching meaning and emotion to it's really important, because like actions, things, events in life only have the meaning that we apply to them. So if you go in with that negative mindset, it's like you said, it's going to fester and everything's going to get worse. But if you go into it just going, well, it's done, I can't control this, move forward, I think you're going to come out of the whole thing a lot better off.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, that's a great example as well, because you've been in the lifting and the coaching space for a while. You've heard people talk about tearing things. You've seen people tear things. You've heard people describe it. So inherently, you kind of know what to expect. So your brain can rationalize that really quickly. Yes. I've experienced tears multiple times. I know what they feel like. So it happens. It's just like, yep, it's torn. Like, you can't do anything about that. If you've never experienced that, if that's brand new, you can have as much, like you did, you can have experience, but it's then up to your brain to kind of rationalize that through the shock, through the instant pain, through the bad feeling, through the fact that you've just failed a rep. You have to then rationalize that, and it can compound, right? If you already have a really hard time with even just missing a rep, I've never really got that upset with missing a rep. Maybe I can recall one time, and that was a bad day not related to the actual gym. And it's like, I laugh when I miss a rep. It's just like, oh, well, I tried, I missed it, big deal, I'll come back and get it later. So that emotion's removed. I don't have to care about the fact that I had to bail on a rep. So I don't get upset about that. And then it's like, well, I know it's torn. I know I can't do anything about it. It's kind of funny. It's just like, oh, well, I'm at the end of my prep and I've torn a muscle. Yay. It's like, okay, well, can't do anything about it. So that doesn't upset me. But yeah, I mean, talking about that is so easy. It's so much easier said than done, because if you haven't had that lived experience, if you haven't been through it, of course it's going to be shocking. And if you're the kind of person that's upset easily, you're going to get upset. It's just how quickly can you get past that and rationalize it and understand that, okay, well, you're not planning on quitting lifting. This isn't the end of your career. You're going to keep going.
Exactly. And this is, I think, where it ties back into a conversation that I'm sure we've had before about identity. Like, if you're at the point where powerlifting is your whole life and you identify as a powerlifter, like when people ask what you do, the first thing you say is powerlifter. When you get injured, it's going to be really hard not to attach all of that negative meaning to it. It's going to be really hard not to go into that funk, because you've just had something slap up against your identity or a huge part of your identity as a person, and that's going to have a really negative impact. This is why it's important to have things outside of lifting that you have an enjoyment over, a hobby or whatever it is, but having stuff that allows you to not pursue other things while recovering or anything, but to not be like, well, my whole life's fucked because I tore my pec benching. Like, I can't bench anymore, so I'm not a powerlifter anymore, so fuck this. Then you spiral down into this really negative place. But if you can have a wide variety of interests and pursuits in life, then you're just going to find, I think, that slightly more positive approach to an injury a little bit easier to manage.
Yeah, if you tear your pec, it's not like you can't go to work and type and make your money and go home and feed yourself and feed your family, or drive to Centrelink and collect your payments or whatever it is you do to get your money. You know what I mean? It's not the end of the fucking world. So, Yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's torn. I went and got a scan. It's torn, but it's a shitty little muscle that's torn. It's a gracilis. It doesn't really do anything. So, if I'm feeling good enough in a couple of weeks, the heal time on it is only sort of 2 to 3 weeks to be mostly healed. It doesn't have a great role in what I'm doing. It might tear again and it might hurt, but it's not actually going to prevent me from lifting. So if the pain isn't too bad, if it's healed up in the next couple of weeks, I'll still have a crack at Pro Raw. I just won't perform as well as I would have, just because it's smack bang at the start of my peak.
Yes.
But, that's life.
Indeed.
There are many other comps to do.
Exactly.
So, Jonathan.
None
I know
of those
John's
things.
not short
John.
for any of that.
Yeah, John
It's just
is fine.
Yeah. So let's shorten John. Let's call you Joe. Let's not do that ever again. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm okay with that not being a thing. So you suggested we should talk about the differences between coaching online and coaching in person.
Yeah, well, actually, it was Chris Barry that suggested it to me to talk about. So shout out Chris Barry.
Shout out Chris.
But yeah, let's have a chat about that, I suppose.
I think it's
relevant. Oh, you go.
I was about to say basically the same thing. I think it's a really interesting conversation, especially because the online coaching space has blown up in the last 5-10 years. Since I got into powerlifting in like 2010, now it seems that everyone who's done a meet, and some people who haven't, online coaches and selling programs and doing all these things online, which I think is great. But it's I think for a start, they're two different skills. They're very closely related and there's a lot of crossover, but it's a really different skill. And not everyone's good at both. So my understanding of your business is it's predominantly online, like the vast majority of what you do is online stuff. Do you want to give us a little bit of essentially an overview of how you do it, just so we've got a framework for how it works, and we can sort of break things apart from there?
Yeah. I think before I say that, I guess it's important to say that not all coaching is the same. And what I mean by that is, think of it like food. Food is not all the same. Is food calories, macronutrients? Is food the quality of the food? Like, can you compare McDonald's with a Michelin star restaurant? Does it all fall under the same category of food? It's like, well, yes and well, no. Is it the same product? Well, not quite. Is it going to provide some level of sustenance? Yeah, I guess so. So I think, especially in the online space, the word coaching doesn't necessarily encompass what everyone does, because there's coaching and there's coaching, right?
And that's the difference between programming and coaching.
That's right. That's a whole nother ball game as well. And I think it's even deeper than that. There is programming and there might be technique coaching, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're coaching. So having a good definition of what coaching actually is important. And I think, to me, what coaching is like, you've got the person has some sort of pain, they have some sort of issue, they have some sort of thing that they need to do, that they need help with. You have the key, you have the road, the destination, the means of getting to the destination. The thing is, they know what that is. It's your job to make them walk down that road, right? It's your job to make them to talk to their pain, to find out what their pain is, and to then give them the tools and the skill set they need to take the steps that they know they need to take to get to their destination.
And sometimes that's just about asking the right questions.
That's right. So, being a good teacher, asking the right questions, knowing how to communicate with their person, that's what coaching is. It's not just numbers on a piece of paper. It's a unique, in-depth understanding of the whole package, and being able to deliver that in a way that's going to be conducive to the end user, right? But without getting too ranty about that sort of stuff, I think...
I like first thing in the morning, salty, ranty Thomas. It's my favourite Thomas.
Yeah, especially when my eyes are fucking burning. This is really bad. Where I guess my method is a little bit different to other people's is that really in-depth, intense sort of feedback on their videos, on their lifting, on the technique, and giving them the guidance in the performance of everything to make sure that the end goal is reached. It's not just about numbers on paper and people send me videos and I'm like, hey man, that's good. And Mike's, I can't really speak of other online coaches because I have never had an online coach in Australia, so I don't know what everyone's doing. But from the ones the people that I get from other coaches that say, oh wow, you've given me more feedback than they ever said to me, and it's not a reflection on them because they just don't have that system. This is just always what I've done. I think where my method differs is that I go really, really in depth on the video review stuff, and I'm really quite good at it. I've just got an eye for it. I've got a skill for it. That's just what I'm known for, right?
And that coaching eye is something that takes time to develop. You know, like it's pattern recognition. It's an understanding of a systemic approach to biomechanics and movement. It's all of those things that combine to give you that eye where, like, I can see you squat an empty bar and know what it's going to look like when you break down with a heavy weight on your back. I can see you bend over to pick something up and know how you're going to deadlift, right? I think that you develop that skill, and so often I get people who show me videos or ask me to watch things and go, this doesn't feel right, but I can't see why. And then someone like you or I can watch this, see it, and correct it very quickly because you've developed that eye. You've developed the skill of, okay, well, it's almost like an algorithmic approach. Like, this is happening, we'll try this. If that doesn't correct it, then we'll try something else. And like, I'm infinitely better at that now than I was 5 years ago. And it's a skill that takes time to develop. Just because you've been to a powerlifting meet and you've done 2 preps and one of them you got injured and performed badly doesn't mean you can be a coach. You know, like that. Everyone's got to start somewhere, and I'm not belittling people who have a lack of experience, but you've got to sort of be critical enough in your own thinking to know what your abilities are and know where your scope of practice is. Because I think that's a really important part of coaching as well, is knowing when you're outside of what you know. You know, knowing when you've got someone who has an issue that's beyond your scope of practice.
That's right. And it's one thing to have seen 1,000 squats. It's another thing to have actually looked at 1,000 squats. And it's like, we've been watching these over and over and over. You feel like a little bit of a Rain Man. Someone shows you a video and they're like, okay, this feels off, something's wrong, or hey, can you give me feedback on this? And I can look at it and be like, man, your left foot's 2 centimeters back and turned out slightly more than the right, and because of that, you're loading up that shoulder a little bit more, which is explaining the arm pain when you go on bench, and you're not engaging that enough, and blah 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 blah. You can pick up these little tiny things. I explain it to people as like, after a while, it's like they might see a drop of red wine on white carpet, whereas to me it looks like a whole bottle has spilled. You know, these little things just stand out a lot more, and so I think that's a real skill you have to develop. But if I had to choose, like, I guess where we should start this discussion is the major differences between online and in-person coaching, and the benefits and the pitfalls of both. Obviously, with online coaching, you're always going to be limited to an extent because there's going to be an inherent delay in the change that you can manifest in lifting. So
it's retroactive feedback, not peri-session feedback.
Yeah, that was very good. So what he's saying is, in English, like, you get the feedback, you then have to apply it, and then you send another video. And that might, if you're, for example, with most of my clients, they check in once a week, that might take a weekly delay. And then if you still don't get it, might take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Yeah. Obviously, with the skill of the coach, hopefully that can happen instantly. And I think that's another thing where I'm really good, is manifesting that change quickly by communicating a good message. A less experienced coach isn't going to be as good as that. Whereas in person, you can try 4 things right off the bat and fix it in 2 seconds, right?
And I've often, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've often had people who I've tried to explain the same concept 5 different ways online, and then they come in for a session and I put my hands on them and go, okay, move like this. And they go, oh, fuck, there it is. Like, I feel that straight away. And I think that's, like, I would argue that in-person coaching is easier than online coaching from a result standpoint, because you have, that immediate feedback, but the tactile element to the feedback. Like, even if you're doing something and I want to show you online what you're doing, I'll film a video of myself doing it, describe it in the video, send you the video, right? But that's still not the same thing as being in the same room, so you can ask questions immediately, but also so I can give you that tactile feedback, like push you a little bit this way or pull you a little bit or shift you slightly or touch you in different spots so you can go here. It's like, can you feel this and can you feel that? And I think that being able to translate that into text, for lack of a better medium, I think is a really much more complex skill than people give it credit for.
Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible, because
not at all.
And I know you're not saying that, but what then the implication of that is that online coaching becomes far more reliant on the client, the end user, their ability to translate that text into action to the degree that you're actually explaining it to it. Because the biggest thing I find when I have, for example, online clients come in and check in with me in person or do technique sessions with me in person, it's like they can get everything that I say online, and often they do, but the degree to which people can try when you're in person and yelling at them and telling them to do stuff. So, the mantra that I get my lifters to lift by is that if you think you're tight enough, if you think you're squeezing it hard enough, you're not. Squeeze tighter, right? And just having someone in person, they can be cueing everything exactly the way that I've taught them. But when you get them in person, you're like, you know what? I want to see you brace harder. I want you to see that, squeeze that a little bit harder. Having the accountability of someone standing there watching you, telling you to do something, often makes you try a little bit harder. And that's the hard thing with lifting, is that there's a lot of self-accountability.
Yes.
You have to remind yourself to be practicing the small things all the time.
Yes.
So having someone there in person to guide you through that is often one of the missing elements, I believe, of online coaching, which is one of the things that because I love online coaching. Like I said, I get amazing results out of it, and I've built my business on it. But it's one of the things I wish I could do a little bit better through the online medium, but it's just so reliant on the end user and their ability to translate that into action.
Yes. So on that point, do you have like an avatar or a description of someone that you would say online coaching is not the right option for?
I've never talked someone out of it. I always try, and I always, as long as because most people are going to come to me for coaching because they want to be coached by me, right? Yes. And I'll do my very best to get them to where they need to go. But I definitely do believe that some people respond a lot better or don't respond as well to online coaching. Now, the hard thing is that it's not a side-by-side view, because I might never see that person in real life. And who's to say in real life that they're just as unco and can't get the feedback in real life that they do online. However, it's definitely easier for the average person to get tangible results when you're standing there with them and guiding them through it than it is online. Yeah. Even with the experience and the time that I've dedicated to the online medium, I still believe it's probably easier to get tangible outcomes quicker in person than online. That's not to say, like I still greatly value online coaching, and I'll continue to do it. But there's definitely an archetype of people that are going to respond much better in person than online. And again, that's just down to the end user.
For sure. I think one of the other things that's important to touch on as a difference, and sort of in a similar vein to the video technical feedback side of things, is that ability to just look someone in the eyes. I have enough experience that I can tell if you need a deload by how you walk into the gym and how you respond to things when I say, hey man, how you doing? Because you see that in people, right? Fatigue is way easier to manage when you can see someone every day. That's why professional sports teams train as a team. Because those coaches rely heavily, even if they've got all the greatest technology, and you can use it. Like I was showing Thomas before, I'm developing a new spreadsheet for online stuff, and one of them's like a readiness questionnaire. It's essentially it's a series of questions that I ask you before you start a training session, and it gives you a bit of a score to give you an idea of how you're feeling today. It's a somewhat, like it's a very subjective feedback loop, but I don't think it is devalued because of its subjectivity. I think it's a really important thing to be able to do, to be able to check in as an athlete with yourself. Check in with how you feel today. Know the impact that your life has on your training, right? Because your training doesn't happen in a vacuum. So you need to be able to appreciate that life stress is going to have an impact upon your training. So being able to have that conversation in person and recommend to people straight away, like, hey, Cheryl, I'm feeling a bit shit today. All this life stuff's happening. What should I do? Should I change my training? We can have that discussion in person and modify things as you go. Whereas, and like I always try and give my online clients and my clients in general, like a bit of a scope of practice for manipulating their training sessions. Here's some guidelines if you're feeling shitty. Here's some guidelines if you're feeling really good. Don't be an idiot is basically the fundamental principle of that. And often it's just asking those questions, because I can do it straight away, you can make that recommendation on the spot and potentially have a better effect going forward. I think that's a tool that, if you can get it right in an online space, is really powerful. But it all comes back to that idea of self-accountability and how you think about yourself, your experience levels as an athlete in terms of how long you've been lifting for, how well you know how your body responds to things, what your life is like, all of these factors that go into your ability to translate the coaching, right? Because ultimately a coach is only as good as their ability to communicate. And an athlete's only as good as their ability to process that communication into action. So I think it's a two-sided coin in that aspect, that the skill you've developed is that ability to communicate what you want in text form in a delayed setting, but then it really does rely upon the athlete's ability to do it. And I've had a couple of people that I've talked out of online coaching, most because they were people who are relatively old, with very little to no training experience, and in that aspect, I didn't feel like I was doing them enough justice to give them coaching. Like, I feel like what you need at that point is someone to just walk you through the beginnings of it. Because, if you're 55 and you've never lifted weights before, starting with an online powerlifting coach is probably not the way to go. I think that you will get more bang for your buck learning it from someone who can teach you in person. And then potentially you develop the skill and you can then be in a position to do it. But I think there's definitely a bit of a skill prerequisite for online coaching. I think from my point of view, most beginners will get more out of, most like complete beginners will get a lot more out of someone, even if it's only for 4 weeks, to just take you through some stuff and show you what it feels like in person and be able to make those changes. Because I think it speeds the process up because you have that immediate feedback. It's not that person couldn't get something out of online coaching, but is instead that I think you'll get more out of a shorter period of time of in-person coaching, and then potentially you go down that road further into your journey.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that about like the prerequisite skill level. I guess I'm in the fortunate position where people come to me because they know I'm a powerlifting coach. They're already doing powerlifting, blah blah blah.
Yes.
The other thing that kind of ties in nicely with is one thing that you'll always get in person that you're not going to get quite as well online is just the interpersonal relationship, which can be good and it can be bad. Can be really good because one of the scourges I have of this whole coaching world is this idea that everyone is supposed to be friends. Like you're supposed to be friends with your clients, you're supposed to be friends with your coach.
There's a difference between being friendly and being friends.
Exactly. And when you become friends or you try and force friendship or whatever and it becomes too personal, it encroaches or it blurs the line between friendship and business. And when/if things go wrong or have to end for whatever reason, whether it be finances, whether it be lack of progress, or if it's a more dramatic ending, it ends up, rather than just severing a business relationship, potentially severing a friendship as well. And you just see it happen too often where things get a little bit too messy.
Yes.
On the flip side of that,
That's not an excuse to be a cunt, just quietly.
No, absolutely not. No, definitely not.
You shouldn't treat everyone you coach like a dickhead because you don't want them to get too friendly.
That's
But
right.
it is important to have those distinctions between being friendly and being friends.
Yeah, so of course I'm very nice and friendly with all my clients, especially my online clients. But I don't develop the same sort of interpersonal relationship that I would, because I don't spend an hour with them in the gym where there's a lot of rest between sets where you get to catch up about your day. And, there's not a lot of interpersonal conversation with my online clients as there is with the people that I have in the gym.
Yes.
So because of that, there is an element of, I guess, sterility, but it's not in a bad way at all. It's
No.
just different.
It's
just
a
highlighting the fact that it's
it's a
different.
different-
And
yeah.
some people really need that kind of, if you're a little bit more dramatic of a person, if you're a little bit more of a needy person, some people need a bit more attention. But that comes down to the client-coach relationship that should be set out from the start around expectations, right? So if you sign up with me, there's certain packages that you pick, and you know how often we're going to converse. You know how often you're going to hear from me. And if that doesn't fit the mold with what you believe you need, then you're not going to sign up. So,
Yes.
that's up to you to make that decision. Just, I guess the point out of this is that the relationship that you're going to have coach to client in the online world versus the in-person world is just going to be a little bit different.
Yeah. And some
yeah.
people, because of that difference, that's where I think the biggest difference in your ability to get results from that comes from the type of person that you are and what's going to work best for you. If you're a relatively clinical person in your approach to training and you have a reasonable amount of experience and you take feedback well, then fuck, man, you're going to get a lot out of online coaching. But if you're, like you said, someone who needs a bit more attention, who maybe needs their hand held through a few things, that's not a bad thing necessarily. I think it becomes a bad thing when you need that person so much that you can't do it without them. And I've ranted about this in the past, but the idea of empowerment versus education, it's not empowerment if you rely on that person to get you through things. You know, if you rely on me to be there every time you do anything and you can't do anything and make your own decisions, then I don't consider you to be empowered. And maybe you go through that stage initially, but the goal is always to move you away from that. At least it is for me. So, yeah, it's not that that's a negative thing necessarily, but I think a good coach should be able to transition you out of that into a slightly more autonomous model where you can have the guidance, you can have the programming, whatever it is, the feedback, but it's not this over-reliance and this codependent pattern where you end it's a fucking excellent business model. You'll make a lot of money out of it because you create these people who can't do anything for themselves, and therefore the only way they continue to get results is to continue to pay you. I don't know about you, but I've got morals, so I tend to lean away from something like that.
Well, I have morals too, and I'm also not that strong. I couldn't breed a team of people that relies on me. I couldn't deal with the
and it's emotionally fucking draining,
emotion.
man.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the hard thing. There are days, I know as a gym owner, there are days where it takes me a minute to get into the gym, in that I need to sit in my car for 2 minutes and just unpack the shit that has happened for the rest of my day and separate it from my approach to walking to the gym. Because as a gym owner, the tone of the gym is set by you. And that's especially important in the type of gyms that we own. And you and I have both been around for long enough that we've watched gym cultures, whole gym cultures, change at the whim of the person in charge.
And it happened so quickly.
So quickly, man. And I think that's one of the harder skills about in-person coaching, is that it happens at a time. The great thing about online coaching is you can do it wherever you are. You know, I went down the coast and filled out a bunch of online coaching feedback things while I was sitting on the couch looking at the ocean, drinking a beer. I can do that, and it allows you that flexibility. And if I don't feel like doing it and I don't need to do it straight away, then I don't have to. But if someone's booked a session and I've had a shitty day, I still need to be able to turn off my baggage and come to the session with the best coaching ability that I can. So I think that's a skill that not everyone has in person. If you're the sort of person whose mood is largely dictated by what happens day to day, and then you come into a session where you're feeling flat and shitty, it's going to come off in the client that you're coaching, right? It's that
Definitely.
that energy is reflected really obviously. So I think, again, that's a skill that you need for an in-person coach. You need that ability to be empathetic at the time and understanding, and sometimes it's just standing there letting people talk, you know. Like I've done sessions where it's like, well, what you got out of that was a really cheap therapy session. And like I try and make it clear to people that I'm not your fucking therapist. I will listen to your issues as to how they relate to your training, but I'm not here for you to fucking unpack your whole life with, because I'm not a therapist. And if I was, I'd be charging a lot more than I do. And it then, like, having that as a skill, that it's that interpersonal relationship that's harder to fake. Like, it's harder to just turn on and off in person than it is online.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think it's a skill that not everyone has. I like to consider myself relatively good at it, but I'm not perfect. I still have shitty days. There are some days where it's just a complete write-off because I just can't get out of whatever is in my head, but I'm working on that like everyone should be. And if you have that skill in person, it translates really well. And all of your clients will get more results. But if you're a really moody person who has a hard time breaking away from or separating your emotions from what's happening right now, then that in-person, interpersonal stuff is going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, that's one of the cool things from a coaching perspective with online coaching. It doesn't matter how shit you're feeling at any given time. People can just see your words.
Yes.
So, you know, you can, I guess you can filter out how bad you're feeling as long as you can articulate what you need to articulate to that person.
Because your
in a way that
emotions
doesn't
won't
show that.
have the same impact upon their emotions because of
That's
that,
right.
because of the delay, but also because of the medium. The message is different because the medium is different.
That's right. And let's say you have a client at 5 o'clock and something big happens at 4 o'clock. You still have that client at 5 o'clock. If something
Exactly.
big happens at 4 o'clock, you can coach that person online at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, or do their review in the morning, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
However, the flip side of that is, like, as a coach, the prerequisite to online coaching is you need to be articulate. You need to know how to write.
Yes.
You know, don't underestimate the value of good grammar, good punctuation, good English, good written communication. If you can't write, you don't come across. It's crazy how much people tie in general intelligence to how well you can write things down. Because I mean, it's not inherently tied in, but people will reflect that. It's like, if you can't even spell a word, how are you going to teach me how to lift?
Also, if you
know what I
can't
mean?
spell a word in the modern society where everything's done with spell checker anyway, then you're an idiot. Because, like, even if you can't spell a word, like, necessarily is a word that fucking gets me every time I write necessarily. I spell it differently.
NESSECSH.
Close enough. So it's a word that it throws me every time. But everything I fucking write has a spell checker on it. So
That's
I
right.
just correct it. Like, if you're sending people a really poorly formatted, bad, like, filled with grammatical and spelling errors, like, I just think it becomes a less professional service, you know? And ultimately, I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. Like, this is a profession. This is what I do for a living. I joke about it not being a real job, but I take it really fucking seriously. And I think there is a certain element of the online coaching space in powerlifting and Instagram fitness that doesn't take it very seriously. Like, it's just an easy cash grab.
But man, and that's what I was harping on about the fucking coaches thing before. You can't call those people coaches. They're not fucking coaching anything. They're paying someone to write a mass-produced program and sending it out and cashing in on a quick buck. That's not.
And
fucking
occasionally
coaching.
telling them how awesome they are. Like,
Exactly.
If as a coach, that was air quotes for people who are listening and they can't see it. As a coach, if your only feedback is positive, you're doing it wrong. There's this excellent quote by Greg Everett from Catalyst Athletics that I used to have on the wall at PTC, but I lost the bit of paper I'd printed it on. That says, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but it says as essentially, if the rep was good, I'll either say, if I'm silent after a rep, it's because either the rep was good or it was so bad I can't possibly bear to speak to you right now. And to be honest, that's tends to be my coaching approach. I'm not very good at telling people how great things are. I'm really good at being critical because it could have been better. Like, it was good, but it wasn't great. It could have been better. And I think
That's your job, to make them fucking better.
exactly, right? And I had this discussion with, I'm coaching a group of people so we do a 6-week course that's 2 sessions a week called Prepare to Powerlift. And we run it in the lead up to all our novice comps. It's like 6 people in a group. It's just getting people into the sport, giving you a bit of coaching and guidance around technique and stuff like that. And one of the people said yesterday, because one of the guys did a deadlift, and I said, man, like, that was heinous. Like, heinous was the only description of that deadlift. And he laughed and was like, yeah, I know. And then someone said something about like, oh, it's so harsh and critical. I said, yeah, but my goal is that I want to be so critical of you in training that by the time you get to the platform, it's perfect. By the time you get to the platform, I shouldn't have to say anything. I've done my job. It's time for you to execute. I think the people that spend their whole life coaching people positively, like, I'm not saying positive reinforcement is bad. I'm not saying you should only ever tell your clients how shit they are. But there is an inherent value in constructive criticism. If all you ever do is tell people like, yeah, that was amazing, and you hold a really low barrier for that, I think you're devaluing the service. You're putting yourself in a position where that person's going to get to the platform and they're going to perform like shit because they're not used to being critical. And then almost inevitably, they end up in a position where that negative feedback on the day, like they get red lights in their squat because they squatted high, because you haven't told them in 6 weeks that they were squatting high, that's going to have a really negative impact on their emotions. And then they're going to perform like shit. So if you can be critical of your clients and hold them to a high bar, like I hold my clients to a high standard because I want them to be the best that they can be.
Exactly.
Occasionally, some people do better with being told, like, you're okay, you're doing well, keep going.
Yeah.
Right? But the majority of my feedback is you could be better because I want you to get the most out of it. And sure, there's some people that need their hands held initially and maybe don't do very well with that. That's why I'm not very good at coaching my girlfriend.
Nobody is.
Exactly. But I think...
Not your girlfriend. I mean, nobody's coaching. You know what I mean.
I knew what you meant.
I'm so sorry, Sim. Don't kill me.
She doesn't listen to this podcast. She doesn't give a fuck about it. So, yeah, I think there's a time and a place for positive reinforcement and encouragement. But if the entirety of your feedback and coaching philosophy is built around high fives and telling people they're amazing, I think you're doing it wrong.
That's right. And I mean, that comes back as well to knowing your lifters and having that personal relationship. Because if I coach the people online the same way that I talk to the people in the gym, I'd be in a lot of trouble. Like, I can come in the gym and see someone do, like, practice a sumo and be like, man, if I see that one more time, I'm closing the fucking gym and I'm going to go herd goats in the Himalayas for the rest of my life because that was the worst thing I've seen in my entire life. If I type that to someone, I wouldn't be in a job.
No.
Let me give you guys the reality of a successful online coach.
Oh, shit.
Right?
Here comes Salty Thomas.
Your phone's never going to stop fucking going off. You need to be really good at deciding who you reply to, when you reply to them, and how you reply to them, because it's never going to stop going off.
And setting expectations about that. Like you said earlier, that's really important, and I didn't do that very well in my early gym owner career. But setting expectations around the relationship on, here's when I am available to be communicated with. Because the thing about instant messaging that people don't understand is that instant messaging means I can send a message to you instantly. It does not mean
the other way around.
Yeah, it does not mean you send me a message and I reply instantly. That's not how it fucking works, people. None of you pay enough to have contact with us 24/7, 365.
We're not a Telstra auto chat. Oh, wait, Telstra never gets back to you.
Oh, no. Burn.
Thomas, you're so lucky. You get to travel so much. No, I'm not lucky. I've worked hard so I can travel for my job. And when I travel for my job, guess what? The online world comes with me.
Yes.
The internet does not stop. Wherever you go, you are working online. That's the fucking reality of it. You don't stop working. And again, it's about having really clear expectations. If you want to be good at this game, you need to work your fucking ass off. Oh, God. The dream, the pipe dream of online coaching is so overstated.
Yeah, because people think online coaching means they can do no work and get paid for it.
That's right. People equate just online coaching, money. No. That it's not.
Good
and
online
you're not even,
coaching is it's a different ballgame. It takes work, and it's so much of it, I think, comes from setting up the expectations to begin with, so that you don't get someone who's, and I've had people who've done this, like, have sent me 6 messages inside 12 hours. It's like, well, you sent me messages on a Saturday afternoon, and I make it really clear to all of my clients, like, if you message me between 1 p.m. on Saturday when I leave the gym and Sunday evening, there's a pretty good chance I'm not going to reply till Monday. That's an expectation that I've set because I have a family and I want to have some time where I can spend time with my family. It doesn't mean I will never get back to you in that period. Occasionally I will. And if it's an emergency, just fucking ring me like an adult. But the expectation that I should be getting back to you with 3 seconds delay would mean that people like you and I never fucking put our phones down. You'd always be replying to messages just constantly. And I think that if you can set that expectation up really well, and then the person that you're coaching knows what they're getting out of the service, they know what they're paying for, and you make it really clear, it's easy to do, but it's still going to be a lot of fucking work. Like, you don't just click some buttons, update a number in a spreadsheet and go about your day. Like, that's not how online coaching works. If you do it well and you get good results out of it, it's going to take work. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of, like, really focused work. Like, you can't give people feedback on videos while you're watching Netflix because you won't be paying enough attention, and they won't be getting the quality feedback that they need. So I think if you can set those expectations and know what you're getting into when you sign up for coaching, I think you're going to be better off. But a lot of people, the coach's expectations about what coaching is the thing that's wrong, not the athlete's expectations.
That's right.
If you're paying $20 a week for online coaching, you're probably not going to get the same level of feedback you are if you're paying $60 a week for online coaching. The value is in the product.
That's right. So, I mean, this was really an in-depth discussion to say, they're both viable options.
Yes.
They're just different. It really just highlights the differences between the online and the in-person medium, and that not either way works for everyone, and that both ways can be really good for some people. And it's like, find the right coach, find the right medium, and you'll make progress. And if it's not working, coaching is a business service. It's a product. Go find a product that works better for you.
Yes. As a coach, I'm not offended when you decide that we no longer should be working together. I don't take it personally, because if I did, I'd be miserable all the time. Because people leave. Like, these relationships evolve. People go places. People change their minds. People do different things. As a coach, if you are overly emotionally invested in the relationships you have with your clients, I think you're in for a bad time.
That's right. And it just highlights insecurity. It's like, my business isn't surviving well enough. And that's not a reflection of the fact that people are leaving you. That's a reflection that maybe your product needs to grow and evolve and change.
Yep. Exactly.
And it's not even a personal thing. I mean, it might be. I don't know who you are. But, if people are constantly leaving your product, you can't get upset at the people. You have to get upset at the product. You have to learn from that. You have to grow from that. And you need to get better. That's the only way that my business has gotten better, is by constantly assessing, okay, what needs to change, what needs to grow, how can I improve this? And if you continue to do that, continue to be self-critical, you'll make progress.
I think that's an excellent place to leave things.
Yes. Amen.
I don't really have much to add to that, really. And we've already stated that we're not very good at this. finishing podcast things. So
We got to stop saying that though, because that just perpetuates the belief. Let's be confident this time, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Pro Raw is coming up. We're going to record a bunch of great interviews. We've got some great guests lined up. Okay, bye.
You had a really good thing going there, and you lost your train.
Yeah,
You could have
I
rolled.
had an
You
eight.
could have rolled nicely into give us a 5-star review, share it with a friend, tag us on Instagram. We'll see you later. But you fucked it. You
I
fucked the
had an
whole thing up.
ADHD attack. I thought of my breakfast. I got kind of disappointed.
Breakfast. All right. Tell your friends. See you later.
All right. Goodbye.